Welcome to Future Customer Value, where global leaders share their career-defining customer moments. On episode 4, we are thrilled to feature Eric Kingsbury, founder at Retain Solutions based out of San Francisco.
Eric, great to see you. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today. I'm really excited for our conversation and for our audience to hear all the great thoughts that you have. And to kick things off, would love for you to give a brief intro on yourself, your background, and what you're up to today in the CS industry.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Eric Kingsbury. I am the founder and the CEO and the everything on Retain Solutions, which is a customer success enablement consulting firm. What I do is I work with companies that have a customer success organization that they would like to upskill, where they'd like to increase the retention of their customers and their employees by building an enablement program. So I'll come in, give you advice on how to build one myself for your team, and help make sure that you have the successful motion to keep people engaged and make sure that they're the best customer success folks they can be.
Love it. And it's awesome because we were both actually at an event last week in San Francisco, which was full of customer success managers, CCOs. And I feel like one of the biggest topics was about how CS is going through so much change right now, right? And folks need to up level to keep abreast of all the technologies, the processes that are going on. One theme that I kept hearing over and over again is CS broken? Does it need to be fixed? And I think different leaders are talking about that in their different mental models, but I'm curious to hear your perspective on that. Do you think CS is broken and does it need to be fixed?
I think customer success has been broken for quite a while, and I do think it needs to be fixed. And I think we're on the right path. But the truth is, what's been going on with customer success for a long time is we have over-indexed on relationships and under-indexed on delivering value. And what we've seen is that all sort of come to a head in the last 2 years. We're seeing all these companies that are churning, or all the customers that are churning from different companies. And the reason they're churning is because they're not seeing value, because customer success has never really been trained on how to articulate the value. And I think, honestly, customer success is sort of it's almost a leading churn with customer success is a leading indicator the health of your company. Because a lot of companies during the boom times didn't actually figure out what sort of value they were offering you. They could kind of give you a wishy-washy answer, but they never really got around to figuring out, like, what was the dollar figure? How much time were you saving people? How much money were you saving people? And because they couldn't do that, all the customers, when it came time to really tighten their belts, looked at solutions and said, what am I doing here? So customer success is in a transition period because some of these companies are in transition periods. And I think what we're going to see with customer success is a lot more focus on delivering value and delivering outcomes for their customers, whether that's continuing to be via, a high touch model, or it's going to be, that's a huge hot topic, scaled customer success. But regardless of what direction you go, it's going to mean retraining your customer success folks. It's going to mean probably identifying different profiles for customer success. And what that's going to take to get there is going to be a lot of enablement of customer success. Like, customer success is going to need more support over the next handful of years as it goes through this transition, because the role is shifting. And for you to be able to truly change the way the role functions, you have to give people the training and the tools that they need to be able to learn what their new role is and perform it well. And what is that? Well, that's going to be enablement. That's going to be customer success ops. That's going to be investing in new tooling. Some tooling that's going to be heavily influenced or is really going to utilize AI. And that's what I see the future of customer success looking like over the next few years.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we're hearing so much now, do more with less, and you have to be efficiently scaling your organization. Just 2 years ago, customer success and having more CSMs almost served as a crutch for the value of your product, right? Because, we have these people who are talking to our customers and they're happy because it's all relationship proxied and relationship based. But when the world has changed, I think it's really starting to shine the mirror back at companies and say, why do you exist? And what is the value that you're supporting and enabling for your customers? And that is a different talk track. And I love that you're focused on operations and enablement, and that's what you're doing these days. CS has to up level and reimagine the way they interact with customers because the world's changed and customers are a lot more empowered now too. So it requires a different motion.
Yeah, I mean, fewer than 40% of customer success organizations have their own dedicated enablement. And
Wow.
it's not that many more that are supported by sales enablement or revenue enablement. We're still looking at 55% of organizations in a report that I read this week have no enablement to speak of for customer success or anyone in post-sale.
Oh
And
my gosh.
how you imagine you're going to be able to transition customer success from where it is now to where it needs to get to without that additional support is beyond me.
Totally. And I'm curious to your thoughts on this. We've got revenue enablement, as you mentioned, RevOps, CS Ops has become much more of a mainstay in organizations. What do you see the collaboration or verticalization or maybe function specific verticalization of these ops roles? Because they're popping up, and are they all under the same umbrella, or do they really need to be siloed into supporting sales and CS and product ops, right? Or I'm just curious to your thoughts on that, because a lot of people are talking about it and I feel like it's not very clear on which role should support which functions.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that it needs to be specialized for these different teams. Like if you have a revenue ops team and you have a revenue enablement team, they should be supporting everyone who talks to the customers, and they should be using similar tooling. They should be using similar metrics. That's crucial. If you start to get into the situation where like CS has some success metrics and sales has other success metrics for customers, and then other teams have other success metrics with customers, then there isn't any real guiding principle on what delivers value for a customer. There are those metrics that you're measuring your sales team by. Absolutely. How many closes they have, how many opportunities are being created, how many things are converting. That's all real, right? Those things all have to be measured. But if you have a revenue enablement team and if you have a revenue ops team, then what you need are different folks that fall under that umbrella that support, say, post-sales and pre-sales, and sales and customer success. But you don't necessarily need to have dedicated folks doing it. Now, if you just have sales enablement, then that's a mistake. And you should have somebody who's supporting the post-sale organization. You should have a customer success organization. But if you have an umbrella revenue organization, then what you'll need is, you'll need to still support customer success and you need to support sales. But those will all roll up into that broader umbrella organization in the same way that you'll see that with a broader revenue ops organization.
That makes a lot of sense. And I was reading an article that was published by Andreessen a couple weeks ago, A16Z. I'll link it in the comments for folks who are viewing this on LinkedIn and YouTube. But the article really talked about that CS is broken, it needs to be fixed. But one of the key pieces was really understanding what part of the customer journey each role supports. And it's interesting because CS has become this umbrella term for drive adoption, drive happiness, drive revenue, right? Drive upsells, drive cross sells, be the support engine, be the product feedback engine. There's just a lot going on. And what I've started to see is CS being focused on GRR, and then inside sales being focused on the farming inside upsells and cross sells, CS supporting them. Sometimes CS and AM have different roles, but ultimately, no matter what your organization structure, there needs to be enablement. And that's what the article is talking about. The right training with the right tools and processes and segmenting who's responsible for what. Because if you have this catch-all umbrella term, it's really hard to measure and justify the value of the organization, right? And that creates a lot of burden, I feel, on CS and also burnout. So I'd love to, this is something you had talked about in a prior conversation. I'd love to hear you talk about that piece.
Yeah, absolutely. So like ages ago, so the beginning of this year, I wrote this article about what I call the customer success doom loop. And the thing, and it's so much what you were just talking about. Customer success, because of the way it develops organically in an organization, it's totally reasonable that this happens. is you as a startup start to have enough customers that you need to hire somebody to support the customers. So you bring in your first customer success hire, and that first customer success hire usually either has to be a rock star or becomes a rock star. But the way that they do that is often by just doing everything for customers. There's no like defined thing that they do. And so they build great relationships and everyone loves them and they know the product inside and out and they do everything under the sun. And they inevitably, because they're the first person to do it, um, get promoted. And then they try and hire people in their own mold. But the problem is that as your company scales and grows, that role isn't something that continues to work because the people that you're bringing on can't just go sit with product and learn the product inside and out. And they can't be asked to do everything for every customer because they've got way more customers now. Because hopefully your company is really succeeding. And that's why you're bringing on more CS folks. And so what you start to see are CS folks get burnt out. CS folks having just far too many responsibilities. And that's where you start to see this really vicious cycle where customers have become accustomed to the sort of support that was offered by that first hire because you've conditioned them to do that. So they expect a customer success person to do absolutely everything. And when those new CS folks can't do it because they just have too many customers or like that's just not a reasonable ask, then the customers get upset. They start flagging that to management. Maybe that leads to some of them actually churning, which leads to management starting to put more pressure on customer success to do more and oftentimes do more with less. And I've seen this in organizations where they'll start to come up with new metrics to measure them by, or they'll start to say, well, we need you to start collecting this information, or we need you to start upselling. And that leads to even more increased burnout and churn, which leads to an even worse customer experience, burnout churn amongst CS, which leads to a worse customer experience. And then it just becomes this vicious downward cycle. And one of the ways to break out of that cycle is to actually look at what your customer success team does and needs to do to support a customer and how they're delivering value to that customer and really scope out that role. Like cut out that role and say, this is what our CS team does. We're going to enable you on this. And then we're going to say, maybe we need to have other folks that support them. Like maybe customer success shouldn't be doing onboarding. Maybe we should have an implementation team that does onboarding. Maybe upsells should be handled by sales or they should be handled by account management. Maybe we should have a support team. These are all the sorts of things that you should be thinking about because customer success as a catch-all is just going to be a disaster. And it's going to lead you into this doom loop that, like I said, it inevitably leads to your customer success folks burning out and then churning. And you can't, when you do fill new roles, it's just a matter of time before the next person burns out and churns. And you're not going to have a successful motion or customer success motion if you never bother to really sit down and scope what the roles are, figure out what your customer journey is, figure out what your use cases are, figure out how you deliver value, and then really get tight around that.
100%. It's there's a couple thoughts that are coming to mind. One is it's interesting your doom loop. I'd love to see a visualization of this. I should check out your article again and see how you laid it out.
Well, we can link that in the notes. I put
we should link that in the notes
there as well.
For sure. We'll definitely link that in the notes. And I was at SaaStr a couple weeks ago and was listening to John Gleason speak. He's a former head of customer success at Motive. And he gave a great talk about the NRR cycle, right? So everybody wants to increase NRR. And he was showing, and I'll have to find this, maybe I'll link it in the comments too once I get the slide from him, but he was showing that as a company scales revenue from, there were hundreds of millions at the end of it, but from 10 to hundreds of millions, NRR starts to increase because you have individual heroics, right? To your point, CS is playing the do everything role, be with the customer, learn about them, support them, buy them gifts, their kids, right? Everything. And then that burnout happens. And he said NRR actually starts dipping once you get to the mid-market level of your maturity. And that's a lot of the stuff you said maps to. And finally, if you can break out of the doom loop, you'll start to see the NRR increase again. But if not, burnout, as you said, CSMs will churn. And then because customers are so proxied on relationships, if they don't feel like they're getting value from the company and they just really like Eric, right? Or they really like Sagar, and then one of us leaves, they're going to leave. And that's not a great experience for anyone. it's really interesting you say that. And I think another piece you said, which is so key, in sales for so long, Salesforce came out, what, 25 years ago, really measured the performance of sales. And sales is an inherently measurable function. It's not measured, it's not managed, right? And
Right.
so in the customer success world, I think it's just been ambiguous what exactly you should track. And there's a lot of tools that have thrown up 20, 30, 40 different KPIs, OKRs. You mentioned a couple of them of how you should be measuring your value. But when you don't know what exactly to focus on, it's going to be really hard to justify value. And then the CEOs and boards, I can't tell you how many times I've been hearing this, which is frustrating. The CEOs and boards are saying, well, so what are you doing? Like, what is the value that you're driving for the organization, right? Like, why is their NPS so low? It's like, no, you're focused on the wrong things. You need to empower your team, structure it similar to your sales team. Not saying that they have to be salespeople, but they need an organizational structure that with defined responsibilities and objective truths. Because sales has one number, pipeline generation, right? What does customer success have? Like 4 different numbers. And you have a customer health score, which is based on assumptions and a forecast, which is always changing. It makes it really hard. So I guess all this to say is, I'm curious to hear from you, Eric. What do you think are some of the ways to measure CS performance? Are there a couple metrics or a couple frameworks where organizations can have an objective truth, just like for sales, and say, here's how we're going to be measuring the efficacy and impact of our CS organization?
Yeah, I think Jay Nathan actually did a really great post about this a couple of weeks back, where he was talking about North Star metrics and how every company needs to have North Star metrics, which is how they can show a company or their customers exactly how they're delivering value. And he gave a great example of one of the companies that's going public, one of the few in their S1 were writing about how it is that they show to customers that they're delivering value, what their North Star metric is, and then everyone focuses on that North Star metric. So they created something, and I want to say it was something along the lines of the amount of time that your customer spends needing to scroll before they convert. It's something very specific, but what type of value they've said they're delivering is we're cutting down the amount of time that it takes before somebody gets to converting. Because we know that if we cut the time by, for example, 15%, that we're going to see a 45% increase in the number of conversions. That's the sort of thing you need to be focused on. Like, you need to be able to say exactly how you are delivering value, and then everyone in customer success, your entire customer success org, needs to be totally focused on that. And those numbers are not necessarily going to be the same from company to company, because it's all about what value your company delivers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we get wrapped up in trying to come up with, a lot of what I talk about is trying to build a motion that is scalable and repeatable for customer success. But the number that you're focused on is not always going to be exactly the same. And I know something you and I talked about, you brought up all these tools that have come on the market. I think something you and I have talked about is the selfish versus selfless metrics. And the way we measure customer success a lot is with selfish metrics that matter to us as a company around. Sorry, scrap that. It's selfish metrics are oftentimes it's things that customer success is creating to show that they're doing work, or to show that customers are using the product, but not necessarily proving that the customer is getting value out of the product or that the product is doing what we have promised it to do. Those selfless metrics are the ones that are actually proving that there's value and proving that we're delivering that value. And I think for a long time, customer success has shied away from metrics. And I think the reason we've shied away from metrics, it's the same reason that enablement shies away from metrics, is once you really bring hard metrics into the equation, things become a lot more cut and dry. All of a sudden, whether you've provided value or not is not a relationship-based conversation. Your renewal is not a relationship-based conversation. It's, we told you we were going to deliver this much value. Here's how much value we delivered to you. that very much dictates what the size of the next contract is going to be, or if there's going to be a next contract. That can very much dictate what the size of the customer success organization is, um, and how much you as a customer success person should be getting paid or bonused out, or what you should even be doing, or whether you should even be with the company. And it's the same way with enablement. And it's the reason enablement has long depended on selfish metrics that are, they say smile sheets and butts in seats, was what one person told me. And it's, how did you like the course? Did you show up? How long did you stay? That's not really a useful metric. What is a useful metric is whether I was able to give someone the enablement that they needed to be able to learn a new skill. And we know that that skill is something that will allow a customer success manager or someone in customer success, someone in post sales, to be able to drive a new behavior with a customer that drives them towards value.
I think that is so spot on, because it's not about the selfish metrics are inherently about the vendor. It's more about what is the customer's objectives, like you said, that one North Star metric that the company going public was focused on. And the customer has to self-define that. They have to self-report what they care about. Once they self-report that, now your organization can start to map to what they told you and drive more value across the key use cases they care about and everything. But I feel there hasn't been a great framework to do that, right? And we lean on selfish metrics, which are easy, such as usage or sentiment.
I would push back to say that they have to define it. And the reason I say that is they have to define it now. What should happen, what companies should be doing, is they should be saying, these are our use cases. If you fall within this use case, then here's how we will be measuring success. And we know this is going to be saving money because of X, or this is going to be saving you time because of Y, or we know that these behaviors, if customers perform them, lead to an increase in conversion. That's something that you as a company can actually articulate. That does not depend on the customer. Now, right now, what we do often when we actually even ask customers about value and outcome is, what are the metrics that really matter to you? And let's figure out how we can drive those metrics forward. Sometimes that's 2 and 3 levels downstream of that, but our solution can drive X, which drives A, which drives 1. And 1 is the thing that matters the most to you. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we do have these North Star metrics that we are defining, where we're saying we know what we can deliver with this use case, but that requires you to get really tight around use cases. And that's something else that, in my experience in SaaS over the last 10 years, a lot of companies really struggled to articulate what their use cases were and what their ideal customer profile was, because once you do that, you can't sell to anyone. You have to sell to specific people. And instead of leaning into the riches and niches mentality, they just go, well, we can just try and get anyone to use our product. And the truth is that every product isn't for every person. And I understand the bigger the total available market, the bigger the raise. But that's not necessarily the way that you're going to make the true enormous amount of money that you're looking to make. But it is a way to go way too broad for any customer success team to ever actually manage, and to get a bad reputation because you don't actually deliver the value that you say you will, or you don't even know what value you're trying to deliver.
For sure. And then the way that you serve a banker in the mid-market is going to be different than the way you serve a teacher, in the public school, because some solutions are going to serve both of those types of personas, right? And that's totally 2 different CS motions. And so you have to be really dialed in on what is not only what does your product support, what business outcomes does it drive, but what does the enablement and support model look like to make those customers actually realize the value? And if that's really spread out, the same way that your top of funnel spread out, you're going to see a lot of churn happening.
Yeah, I worked at a tech company once that we had decided that everyone, every single small business in America could be our customer. And we did not discriminate. And so sometimes we were selling to tech savvy tech companies, and sometimes we were selling to literally a monastery for seniors who didn't have email addresses, um, and had never used computers. And you had to have an email address to be able to use this product. Sometimes we would sell to supermarkets where most people didn't, where there were a lot of employees that didn't speak English, and the product was only in English. So all of the what that did was it created a ton of unnecessary heartburn for everyone downstream of sales. So everyone post sale was dealing with this and trying to figure out how to make this work because we were just trying to sell to everyone. Anybody could do this. Like, look, we have this solution. It's so easy. Anybody can do it. And it led to so many bad experiences for customers
Yeah.
and to so much burnout and churn in our post-sale organization. And that's the sort of thing that I continue to see. I mean, I'm shocked. That was almost 10 years ago. But, it's the sort of thing that I continue to see. You can't just decide that everyone's your customer. There is
Yeah.
a niche that you're focused on, and you really need to get tight around that and then get tight around the use cases, how you deliver value for that niche, and really deliver that well. And that's going to make it so much easier for you to define your customer journeys and to define what all of the post-sale roles, are and what they're going to do and how they're going to deliver value, and for you to be able to enable folks on that and hire people into those roles and really be able to create that scalable, repeatable motion that you
For
need
sure.
to have to really build a successful organization that's humming.
Totally. And I've been hearing this a lot with folks who are in this, who have been CS leaders and who actually uh, left to support CS organizations in fractional capacities about this ICP point. And it's an ideal case where a paradise of go-to-market where you have a very dialed-in ICP that strings all the way through the post-sales motion. But we know that's not reality, and that's very hard to do. Sales doesn't want to listen to reducing their TAM or maybe their pipeline. So what guidance or how would you help leaders on the top of funnel side to shift the perspective and align to what is going to drive value on the post sale side? Because I feel like that's a hard conversation to have. And they are mutually aligned, but it can come off as, hey, why are you taking away my pipeline? So do you have any thoughts on how to get leaders to be focused, dialed in, and create that discipline across the organization?
I would say one way that I saw some success in the past, uh, and this was a little harder, was we had bonus clawbacks. So bonuses that went to sales got
Oh,
clawed back if customers churned, if they churned within
interesting.
12 months. And so that was one way to try and tighten things up. But the truth is, and I say this as somebody who does enablement, and my entire job is getting people aligned and working with them to be able to, build out the necessary processes and trainings that people need to be able to do their jobs. Is you really do have to sit down and articulate what the pain is that's coming from not having an ICP. So, what is the impact of not having an ICP? The impact is additional churn of customers, additional churn of customer success, uh, customer success bloat because you can't handle as many customers when they're all on fire. Um, you are very likely seeing a lot more support tickets, a lot more support needed. In the end, you are costing the company money by trying to sell to the wrong people. And that's the sort of conversation that you need to be having with leaders is what sort of pains are you creating by choosing the selfish route? And I understand that's frustrating because I absolutely want to be bringing in as much revenue as possible too. But there are certain times where you really do need to think and slow down for a moment and say, okay, well, what's best for the company? not necessarily what's just best for me and what's best for the long-term future of the company. Because
Right.
a lot of us, when we're joining startups, one of the reasons we're doing this is because you're taking a lottery ticket, right? You're getting this equity, and if you want your equity to pay off in the long term, then it needs to be a company that can actually make it for a long enough period of time to justify going public, and that the public will then like have confidence in. You don't want to be stuck in one of those situations where it's that rocket ship that blows up, because yeah, you can make quite a bit in the short term, but in the long term, it's not going to turn out
Yeah.
well.
It's I lost my train of thought for a second. I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, it's totally fine.
Yeah, let me take this in a little bit different direction. Look at my notes here. Yeah, so to that point, sales sells potential. CS is supposed to sell outcomes. Those two things can be difficult to align if you don't have a understanding of why and what your core use cases are. It almost feels like there is a need for a use case czar in an organization, or someone who's totally responsible for product market fit and being this filter on both ends of the funnel, right? Of who and what should be able to pass through our organization's doorways to ensure we can add maximum value. So it's a difficult thing to do because I feel like the market's always moving, but I'm hearing more and more from organizations that everybody wants to have a single language of value. How should sales, how product, how marketing, how CS, how support, implementation, account management, how do you talk about the use cases? Because I feel like that vernacular is also very different depending on who you talk to in the organization. And that's a problem in and of itself. So
Oh,
there needs to be an initial stage of aligning everybody on use cases. What's your menu of use cases you're giving to the market, and then get everybody to speak the same language?
So the big thing is product marketing needs to lead the way when it comes to use cases. Use cases need to exist everywhere. The same use cases need to exist everywhere, I should say. Like your website should list your use cases. And there should only be so many of them. It shouldn't be this, like if you have 64 use cases, then you don't really have use cases. You should have the customers that you're selling to, and then you should have the use cases that you're offering, and that should be somewhat limited. And once it's on the website, then what product marketing does is they work with the different enablement teams. They work with sales enablement. They work with customer success enablement to get the messaging right around those use cases. Because the truth is, the way that you talk to a pre-sale or somebody before they've been sold, when you're selling them on the dream, is different than when you talk to somebody who you are trying to deliver the reality. When you're selling them on the dream, you can speak in generalities. You can talk about really large numbers that you can be delivering. There's one CS person that I really love, and the way she always talks about sales versus customer success is like sales sells you on a free trip to Hawaii, but the customer success has to explain that you're getting a free trip. It's just to Pittsburgh. So how do you turn Pittsburgh into their Hawaii? And there's very different messaging for that. So having pre-sale and post-sale messaging is something that product marketing is responsible for, and then customer success enablement, or the two enablement orgs, if there's two, or revenue enablement with one person that's handling sales and one person that's handling customer success, will work on delivering to their teams. Sorry. If there's one revenue enablement org, then you'll have one side in customer success and one side sales delivering it to their respective teams. It's crucial that you have messaging that is aligned, but that it also is tailored to the audience that you're speaking to. And that is where marketing is hugely important, because I have seen so many organizations where people seem like they're speaking different language, or they're where people pre-sale and people post-sale seem like they're speaking a different language, and they're using different terminology. to discuss the same things. And you want to be really aligned on that, because the last thing you want a customer to think is that there's so much dysfunction within the organization, the right hand isn't talking to the left.
Sure. And they lose trust and they lose any, value, and eventually they careen away. That's not what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to ask you a existential question here, and
Okay.
curious to hear your thoughts on it. But CS is changing quite a bit. We've seen a ton of trends across AI and automations and even organizational changes that are impacting how CS goes to market. But being where you are and having worked with a ton of companies in-house and now as your own firm, if you could make one prediction on the future of customer success, what's going to happen to our industry? How is it going to evolve? What would it be?
Customer success is going to standardize in the same way that every salesperson that goes to a sales organization does pretty much the same thing. And there is a pretty set of sales stages that pretty much any organization you go to has. Customer success is going to go that same direction. I've said a few times in this podcast that scalable and repeatable are incredibly important. And what we're going to see is customer success go from saying, well, we are special, to realizing the power of being able to say, we're building something that is scalable and repeatable. And what that means is customer success is probably going to go down in, I would bet that the compensation for customer success ends up going down. I talked to some folks at compensation management companies who have already told me that this is the case. It's already happening. And the reason it's going to happen, and like, I'm sorry, my fellow, my friends in CS, I'm really sorry. Don't worry, it's happening to customer success enablement too. Once you've created something that is repeatable, and most organizations have accepted that this is the way that you do things, it makes it much easier to find people that can fill that role. And people will be able to jump from organization to organization more easily. So what you'll see is the pool of people doing customer success, which is already pretty sizable, will grow even more. I think there will be more standardization around the types of courses you can take, the types of information you need, and then customer success enablement and customer success operations, or revenue enablement and revenue ops, will both grow as well. But what they'll really focus on is giving you the specific knowledge and the specific skills and training on the specific tooling and the specific processes that exist at that company, as opposed to the broader skills that you need to be able to do the job.
Gotcha. And I've been starting to see some of that as well with organizations taking revenue outside of CS and putting it back into sales, or breaking up the CS org into account management CS. I think there's still a lot of variability, a lot of change happening. I'm curious where the puck's going to finally fall. But a follow-up question, Eric, is where do you think this change is going to come from? And who's going to drive the agenda? Because there are a lot of technology companies, there's a lot of thought leaders, consultants, obviously organizations themselves are trying to figure this out. But who has a gravitational sway for standardizing customer success? Where's that going to generate from?
Well, I mean, Salesforce created the role, so I could definitely see it being Salesforce, but it could very well be one of the tooling companies too. I mean, it could be something like Gainsight, because if you build the tool that everyone depends upon, and it's built around a very specific way of doing the role, then that could necessitate a shift from all the organizations that use that tool. And like right now, the tool is Gainsight. I've yet to work at a company since Gainsight came on the scene where the customer success org isn't either considering Gainsight or doesn't already have it.
Totally. Yeah, it's a fascinating market because every day there's more CSPs that come on the market. There are point solutions that are best in class and not necessarily customer success as a whole, but maybe one part of the process. So a lot of change, a lot of opportunity for all of us playing in the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because it's still a bit of the wild, wild west, but
It is, yeah, it
it's
feels that way.
starting to gel. And
It
I think
is.
we're seeing that is, and that's what happens when money isn't free anymore, and you need to start thinking a little bit more strategically and being a little bit more deliberate with the dollars you spend.
Awesome. Well, Eric, this has been great. I would encourage the audience to check out Retain Solutions. Eric has a ton of great enablement and a lot of thought leadership articles he's written as well on how to think about and structure the right CS organization. I'd encourage you all to check it out. Before we drop, Eric, is there any thoughts or parting comments you'd want to make for people listening in?
Well, first, I just want to thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
I would say if you aren't already involved in the customer success community, get involved. I think that's one of the bigger mistakes that I made early in my career was sort of dismissing all of the opportunities that exist in customer success. It is the warmest, most helpful, generous community that I've ever been a part of. And folks really want you to succeed and they want to help. So if you have the ability and you have the time, get engaged in the community. You don't have to be a thought leadership. You don't have to make a ton of contributions. It's totally free, but there's a ton of offerings, Slack communities, LinkedIn. If you know somebody who's a little bit better connected, just ask them. They're more than happy to give you a list. But get involved. And if you have questions, ask questions. And I promise you that for every single problem you have, someone has already had that. Someone has already come up with a template. They've already come up with an approach, a methodology, and they are more than happy to share it.
That's great advice, and we should drop a list of all the communities and resources in this post as well. So we'll make sure
I think
to
that
do
would
that.
be great.
We just talked about a few of them before this.
Yep.
Cool, Eric. Well, thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you for coming on, and looking forward to having a part 2 someday.
Yeah, thank you.